So when we talk about the Christmas story, is it just a beautiful myth passed down through the ages? Or is it actual history? Well, today we're going to explore a really fascinating framework that's designed to answer that exact question. It's called the Christmas Quadrilateral, and we're going to break down exactly how it builds its case.
I mean, how do you even begin to tackle a question that huge, right? The thing about the Christmas Quadrilateral is that it's not asking you to just, take a leap of faith. It's actually a model for building a logical, evidence-based argument. It wants to treat this whole question less like a matter of opinion and more like a case that needs to be examined, piece by piece.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to follow this case as it's built, looking at 4 key exhibits: the eyewitness evidence, the archaeological evidence, the profile evidence, and finally, the fingerprint evidence. And all of that is going to lead us to the Quadrilateral's final verdict. So let's officially define this thing. What exactly is the Christmas Quadrilateral? The best way to think about it is as a cumulative case. This isn't about finding one single, smoking gun piece of evidence that proves everything. Nope. It's all about how 4 totally distinct lines of evidence, the eyewitness stuff, the archaeology, the personal profile, and the prophetic fingerprints, how they all interlock to create one single, really compelling picture.
All right, so here's the entire argument in a nutshell, kind of a bird's eye view before we dive in. You've got these 4 pillars. First, eyewitness evidence. That's our testimonial foundation. Then, archaeological evidence, which gives us some physical confirmation. After that, the profile evidence, which digs into the theological claims. And finally, the fingerprint evidence, looking at prophetic fulfillment. The whole idea is that each one is designed to build on the last, creating this really comprehensive case.
All right, let's get into it. First up is Exhibit A, the eyewitness evidence. This is really all about the foundational testimony.
So the first pillar of this whole argument is a pretty big claim. It says that the Gospels aren't just some fairy tales written down centuries after the fact. Instead, this model presents them as reliable biographies, accounts written by people who were either actually there or knew someone who was, and they were written down while the events were still pretty fresh in everyone's memory. Now, this framework doesn't just pull this out of thin air. It leans on the work of scholars like Craig Blomberg, who makes a strong case for the early dating and eyewitness authorship of the Gospels. And the key takeaway, the whole point here is this. If the sources themselves are reliable, then the incredible claims they make about Jesus' life, starting right from his birth, well, then you have to start taking them seriously as actual historical testimony.
And there we have it. The first side of our quadrilateral is now in place. The claim of reliable eyewitness testimony. One side down.
Okay, moving on to Exhibit B, the archaeological evidence. It's time to see if the physical world actually backs up the written word. So this second pillar, it asks a really simple but powerful question. Does the actual physical evidence we've dug up from the ground confirm the specific details in the Christmas story? According to this model, the answer is a big yes, and that provides a really crucial layer of external validation. So what are we talking about here? Well, for example, this approach points to things like the Roman census that's mentioned in Luke's Gospel, and the confirmed existence of real-world places like Nazareth and Bethlehem. The model cites experts like the archaeologist John McCrae, and the whole argument is that when you can verify these physical, on-the-ground details, it lends a whole lot of credibility to those eyewitness accounts we were just talking about.
And just like that, we've added a second side. Now we have 2 parts of the case locked together. The eyewitness testimony is now being propped up by physical, archaeological data, and you can see how the argument is already getting stronger.
Okay, next up, Exhibit C, the profile evidence. This is where we shift our focus a little bit, from what happened to who was he. Now this third pillar, it's a bit more theological. The argument here is that when you really look at everything Jesus said and everything he did, a very specific profile starts to emerge. And that profile is of someone who claimed the very attributes of God. So this isn't just about historical events anymore, it's about the identity of the man at the center of the story.
So how does it build this profile? Well, it uses examples like the miracles, claims of knowing things only God could know, and just really direct statements about his own divinity. And again, it relies on theological scholars like D.A. Carson to argue that, hey, these weren't just the claims of a wise moral teacher. These were explicit claims to being divine.
And boom, there's our third side. With this theological profile locked in, the case is really starting to take shape. We've combined testimony, physical evidence, and now identity.
All right, time for our final piece of evidence. Exhibit D, the fingerprint evidence. This one is really interesting because to make its case, it looks way back into the past.
Okay, this final pillar uses a really powerful metaphor, a fingerprint. Think about it. Your fingerprint is totally unique to you.
right? Well, the argument here is that the Old Testament prophecies create a unique prophetic fingerprint for the promised Messiah. It's a set of identifiers so specific, so detailed, that only one person in all of history could possibly match them all. And this model claims that that one person is Jesus.
We're talking about really specific examples here, like prophecies pinpointing the Messiah's birthplace to Bethlehem or detailing his future suffering. The model brings in experts like Louis Lapidus, who argue that when you look at the sheer number and the incredible precision of these fulfilled prophecies, the odds of it happening by chance are just statistically staggering. It makes a really powerful case for a unique, pre-identified person. And with that final piece, the case is complete. The four pillars, the eyewitness, the archaeological, the profile, and the fingerprint, they now form a closed interlocking argument. We now have the complete Christmas Quadrilateral.
So, the case has been fully presented. All four pieces are on the table. What then is the final verdict of the Christmas Quadrilateral?
Here's the core takeaway. The real strength of this model isn't in any one single side. You could probably poke holes in any one of them individually. No, its power is in their combined, interlocking force. The whole argument is that when you put these four lines of evidence together, they create a coherent case that doesn't really leave any major explanatory gaps. It offers what it presents as a sufficient reason to accept the claims of Christmas, not just as theology, but as history.
So, in the end, the Christmas Quadrilateral doesn't hand you a single, simple proof. That's not its goal. What it does is present a cumulative case, one that's built on testimony, archaeology, identity, and prophecy. And so it leaves us with the final question, the one it was designed to ask. Is this interlocking, four-sided case a sufficient reason to believe?